Hi, I'm Bob Ross, and for the next 13 weeks, I'll be your host as we experience the joy of painting. I think each of us, sometime during our life, has wanted to paint a picture.
For years, the world saw Bob Ross as pure calm on television. But the truth behind that calm is far more interesting than most viewers realize.
Hi, I'm certainly glad you could join me today. You ready to do another fantastic painting with me?
You recognize his iconic image.
Who's this? This is Bob Ross. This is the most famous painter in the history of the universe.
Signature phrases.
A happy little cloud that floats around.
Between 1983 and 1994, Bob Ross appeared on The Joy of Painting in hundreds of episodes that became a symbol of creativity for millions of viewers. But behind all that was a show shaped by intense challenges that were never visible on screen. So, what was really happening behind the most calming program in television history? Join us as we uncover 20 facts about Bob Ross and the joy of painting that will completely change how you see the show. Number 20. The show stole its teacher from a rival program. When The Joy of Painting premiered in 1983, it was not the first time PBS audiences had watched someone paint landscapes in real time. For nearly a decade before Bob Ross ever appeared on screen, a German painter named Bill Alexander had been running a nearly identical show called The Magic of Oil Painting on PBS stations across America. Bill Alexander's show used the same wet-on-wet oil technique, the same basic landscape format, and the same reassuring instructional style that would later make Bob Ross famous. Bob Ross had discovered Bill Alexander's show while working as a bartender in Alaska in the 1970s. He taught himself the wet-on-wet technique by watching Bill on television and then attending his workshops directly. He became Bill Alexander's star pupil and eventually filled in for him on the show itself. Alexander later described Ross as his greatest student. He also described him as his greatest traitor, after Bob left to start his own competing show and company. So who exactly convinced Bob to strike out on his own, and how close did that decision come to destroying him financially before it made him famous? Number 19. The massive loss in its first year. When Bob Ross left Bill Alexander's orbit and decided to launch his own teaching enterprise alongside business partner Annette Kowalski and her husband, the launch did not go smoothly. Annette had attended one of Bob's painting sessions, became convinced he had something that could be packaged and sold at scale, and eventually persuaded him to leave the Bill's organization entirely and start fresh. Annette Kowalski sunk her life savings into the venture. Bob and his wife, Jane, made a similarly significant financial commitment. In its first year of operation, the new business lost $20,000. The pressure was real, and the outcome was uncertain. Money was so tight that Ross made one of the stranger cost-cutting decisions in the history of television. He got a perm, because he calculated that a permed hairstyle would eliminate the need for regular haircuts and save him money over time. The perm that became one of the most recognizable silhouettes in American television history was born from a failed business and an empty budget. And about that hair. Because what Ross actually thought of it, and what happened when the money came back, and he could finally afford to change it, is one of the saddest little facts in the whole story. Number 18. The hair he could never. The perm was a cost-cutting measure that became a trap. Once the business recovered and the show started airing, Bob Ross brand began selling paint products with his image on the packaging. The perm was no longer a financial decision. It was a marketing asset that had become non-negotiable. Annette Kowalski told Mental Floss directly, he could never, ever, ever change his hair, and he was so mad about that. When the company put his picture on the line of paints and brushes, the face with the perm was the face of the brand. Bob had allowed the hairstyle to become the logo without realizing that is what he was doing. And by the time he understood the implications, changing it would have meant effectively retiring a corporate identity that was being printed on millions of products. He kept the curls he hated for the rest of his life, because they were worth more to the business than his personal comfort was. So what other parts of Bob Ross were business decisions disguised as something more personal? Number 17. No payday. For the entire run of The Joy of Painting, Bob Ross worked for free. He accepted no payment from PBS or from any of the stations that broadcast the program. His reasoning was entirely commercial and entirely deliberate. The show was not his income, but his advertisement. Every half hour of television was a promotional vehicle for Bob Ross Incorporated, which sold the specific paints, brushes, canvas boards, and instructional books that he used on screen. The show told millions of viewers exactly what they needed to buy and where to buy it, and they bought it. The television appearance was the engine of the product business, and the product business was where the money actually came from. And the product of that business was genuinely staggering in volume, because the number of paintings Bob Ross actually made across the run of the show is something that most people who watched it have dramatically underestimated. Number 16. Approximately 30,000 paintings. Every painting on The Joy of Painting was made 3 times. The first version was painted before filming began and kept off screen as a reference for Bob to consult while the cameras were rolling. The second was painted live on air. The third was painted after filming with an assistant photographing each individual brush stroke to create the step-by-step images that went into his instructional books. Across 31 seasons of 13 episodes each, Bob filmed at a pace of at least 3 full episodes per day during production. That rate, combined with the 3-version system for each painting, produced an estimated 30,000 individual paintings across the run of the show. The reference paintings painted before filming were the versions that most directly shaped what viewers saw, because Bob was always looking at one while he painted another. None of the on-air paintings except those in season 13 were truly spontaneous. And the reason they were not spontaneous in that one season reveals a genuinely strange story. Number 15. Painted from memory. Every season of The Joy of Painting ran on a system that required the pre-filmed reference paintings to exist before production began. For season 13, those reference paintings were prepared, stored, and then stolen before filming commenced. The thieves were never publicly identified, and the theft was never resolved. Bob had to paint an entire season's worth of episodes from memory, without his usual reference copies to consult. The result is that season 13 stands alone in the show's history, as the only season where what viewers were watching was genuinely improvised in real time, where Bob was not comparing his work in progress against a finished version of the same painting. He completed the season without telling the audience that anything was different, because as far as the audience was concerned, nothing was. The way Bob handled that specific season says a great deal about his actual skill level as a painter, which the show consistently underplayed. So what did he actually train for? And where did the technique that made him famous come from? Number 14. The skill he developed during Air Force work breaks. Long before The Joy of Painting, Bob Ross was a United States Air Force Master Sergeant who had spent 2 decades in military service rising to become a first sergeant at the base clinic at Eielson Air Force Base in Alaska. He did not paint professionally before the Air Force. He started painting during it. Working in Alaska, surrounded by mountains, snow, and the specific wilderness that became the signature visual language of every painting he ever made on television, he began teaching himself to paint during brief daily work breaks. He developed the fast wet-on-wet technique specifically because breaks were short. He could not wait for layers to dry between applications. He needed something that worked quickly, produced results fast enough to fit inside a lunch break and could be sold for money. And the military background of the man who whispered about happy little trees is something that most viewers of the show would have found genuinely difficult to reconcile with what they were seeing on screen. Number 13. Screaming Drill Sergeant for 20 years. The voice that made The Joy of Painting famous was a conscious and deliberate construction built in direct opposition to who Bob Ross had been for the previous 2 decades of his professional life. He served 20 years in the Air Force and retired as a master sergeant. The job requires him to be a mean, tough person, and he was fed up with it. He told himself that if he ever left the military, he would never raise his voice again. He kept that promise so completely that the television persona he built was in some ways the most accurate possible portrait of the person he had decided to become by refusing to be the person he had been. But the man with the whisper and the happy little trees had a personal life that contained losses the calm public exterior rarely acknowledged. So what happened to the wife most viewers never fully knew about? Number 12. The tragic loss and the dedication. Bob married twice. His first wife was Vivian Ridge. His second wife, Jane, was the woman who was with him when the Bob Ross business was built and was present for the entire period of the show's success. Jane Ross died during the 20th season of The Joy of Painting in 1993, approximately 2 years before Bob himself died. He dedicated that entire season to her. He had also, at some point after Jane's death, quietly begun a relationship with Linda Brown, who became his third wife. The show continued after Jane died. Bob continued to whisper about happy little trees. And then, in the spring of 1994, the diagnosis arrived that made everything stop. Number 11. 3. Late-stage lymphoma diagnosis. In late spring 1994, Bob Ross was unexpectedly diagnosed with late-stage lymphoma. The demands of treatment forced him to step away from The Joy of Painting. The final episode aired on May 17, 1994, and he died at the age of 52 on July 4, 1995, in New Smyrna Beach, Florida, where he was buried. One of his final acts before dying was to certify additional instructors in his painting method, so that the teaching workshops he had established could continue without him. In 2024, certified Ross instructor Nicholas Hankins completed the unfinished 32nd season on camera. Using the 7 paintings Ross had prepared alongside 6 new ones Hankins created himself. But the death did not end the conflict over Bob Ross's legacy. It started it. Number 10. The bitter battle over his estate. The relationship between Bob Ross and the Kowalski family, who co-founded Bob Ross Incorporated with him, deteriorated significantly in his final months. The Kowalskis were largely focused on using the Bob name to sell painting supplies. Bob's inner circle alleged that as he became too ill to defend himself, the Kowalskis became aggressive in pushing him to sign over rights to his estate and his name before he died. Bob responded by writing the Kowalskis out of his will entirely. He left his estate to his son Steve and his half-brother Jimmy Cox. The Kowalskis countered this by arguing that virtually everything Ross had done in his professional life was work for hire, meaning Ross had never personally owned the rights he was trying to bequeath. They won control of Bob Ross Incorporated and the associated trademarks, while Bob's family retained no commercial rights to the name and image of the man they had actually known. This is the ugliest fact in the entire story of The Joy of Painting, and it runs directly beneath the surface of every happy little tree the world has ever watched Bob Ross paint. Number 9. The reason his cabins never had chimneys. Annette Kowalski shared one piece of specific artistic intelligence about Bob that illuminates his entire visual philosophy in a single observation. Bob almost never painted human figures. He deliberately kept his scenes free of any human presence, because the landscapes he was creating were meant to be places of peace and solitude, rather than inhabited spaces. Annette told 538, "If you notice, his cabins never had chimneys on them. That is because chimneys represented people, and he did not want any sign of a person in his paintings." The peacefulness of the landscapes was not incidental. That was the entire point. That peacefulness was one of the reasons he could finish the most complex painting in record time. Number 8. 28 minutes and the bravery test. The Joy of Painting ran for exactly 30 minutes per episode. Within that format, Bob had developed a specific internal rhythm that he maintained across every season and every episode. He could complete a full landscape in 28 minutes, which left 2 minutes at the end of every episode as a kind of performance pressure he had deliberately built into his own process. He called those final 2 minutes a bravery test. The bravery test was a way of modeling for his audience the specific psychological skill that separates painters who finish things from painters who tinker indefinitely. But there was more to Bob than just painting. He had a hobby no one would have guessed. Number 7. The Orphaned Animals and the Squirrel Named Peapod. The wildlife that appeared on The Joy of Painting was not a production choice made by someone else. It was an extension of who Bob Ross was in his private life, where he had been taking in injured and orphaned animals since childhood. As a boy in Florida, he raised a baby alligator in the family bathtub. As an adult, he maintained this habit continuously. He had an epileptic squirrel that lived in his empty jacuzzi. He brought animals onto the show because they were part of his daily life, rather than because they made for good television, though they made for excellent television regardless. A baby squirrel named Peapod became the most frequent animal guest on the program, and Bob described Peapod as liking to sit in his shirt pocket during filming. Now, for someone whose fans have watched Paint countless times, no one ever noticed he had a missing body part, but he did. Number 6. Part of his left index finger was missing. Bob Ross never graduated from high school, and after leaving school, he worked with his father as a carpenter. The carpentry work left a permanent physical mark that viewers of the show who did not know to look for it would never have noticed. He lost part of his left index finger in a carpentry accident during that period. He painted throughout the entire run of The Joy of Painting with that finger, and the way he held certain brushes accommodated the missing portion without drawing any attention to it. Now, you've watched him paint countless times, but did you ever wonder where the show was being filmed? Let's find out. Number 5. An historic home in Indiana. The Joy of Painting was not produced in a purpose-built television studio. Seasons 2 through 31 were filmed inside the L.L. Ball home in Muncie, Indiana, a 2-story historic house that was being used as a television studio by Ball State public media station WIP-BTV at the time the show was produced there. An entire season of 13 episodes was filmed in 2 to 3 days of intensive production. The show that appeared to be the most relaxed 30 minutes on television was produced at a pace that left almost no room for error or rest. Could that be the reason why it appeared like he never changed his outfits? Number 4. The deliberate choice of outfit. Every episode of the show features Bob Ross in essentially the same outfit: jeans and a casual shirt. This was a deliberate decision made for a specific reason that relates to the show's longevity. Ross wore simple, timeless clothing because he wanted episodes to be impossible to date. If he wore a specific style that was obviously fashionable in 1985 or 1991, reruns from that episode would feel dated in ways that would remind viewers they were watching something old. Jeans and a casual shirt would, in his calculation, always be in style. Now that it has been explained, let's talk about one of his intriguing attributes that fans consistently overlooked. Number 3. He painted from memory. Bob Ross almost never painted outdoors. The mountain landscapes that defined his visual identity and that appeared in some variation in the majority of his episodes were not painted from direct observation of real mountains. They were painted from memory, specifically from memories accumulated during his years at Eielson Air Force Base in Alaska. With those skills, it's no wonder why the show became popular. But how popular did it become? Number 2. A show that was everywhere. The Joy of Painting was not just a quiet PBS success. At its peak, during the late 1980s and early 1990s, the program was being broadcast in more than 90 countries across the world, including Japan, Mexico, the Netherlands, Germany, and across much of Latin America and Asia. The show's format needed essentially no localization because the content was visual and the voice was more texture than information. So, what eventually happened to all the paintings after Bob's death? Number 1. Sold at auction for mind-blowing prices. Bob Ross never sold a painting during his lifetime. He gave every one of them away. He believed that selling them would undermine the message that the paintings were not objects of commercial value, but products of something anyone could do. 30 years after his death, the paintings he gave away have found their way into collections, charity auctions, and eventually major sales rooms where his oil-on-canvas works have been selling at double and triple their estimated prices. Which of these 20 numbers about Bob Ross and the Joy of Painting shocked you the most? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.